My name is Jay Harrell. I work at QuantStamp. We're a bunch of auditors. And I've been in the space a long time. I care a lot about blockchain. I care a lot about stateless or statefulness futures, so we'll see. And today's panel is called Data is the Foundation for dApps. And so we're just going to go down and introduce everyone.
All right. Testing. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Olshansky. I'm a protocol specialist at Pocket Network. I primarily focus on our consensus algorithm. And what we do is we're a decentralized, multi-chain RPC layer. So in short, what that really means is there's a lot of node infrastructure companies out there. What we do at Pocket Network is we are a protocol that incentivizes everybody else to be a node infrastructure provider of their own, depending on which blockchains you choose to support.
I'm Josh Urath. I lead product at a protocol called Ankr. We started off as a centralized service provider for Web3 nodes. Recently have transitioned to a decentralized protocol very similar to Pocket. We not only offer the RPC layer, we also have liquid staking products. And we have about 60,000 ETH staked on our product right now. And we're one of the validators on BNB chain as well.
Hi, I'm Pranay Walsam. I'm a senior engineer at Covalent. And Covalent, we are the decentralized API for data across all on-chain for EVM and non-EVM. Happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Albert. I go by that guy in tech in the metaverse. At Alchemy, I'm a developer advocate at Alchemy, so I focus on content, community, and conferences. And at Alchemy, our goal is to bring the power of blockchain to 1 billion people. And the way we see that happening is a kind of cycle of life of product development. You have users, but in order to get users, you need to have really good products. And in order to have really good products, you need to have really good data and infrastructure. And so at Alchemy, we're trying to provide that data and infrastructure so that engineers, builders can come into the space and have all the tools that they need to build the really great products for users. So really excited to be here with this panel.
Okay, so an underlying pain point developers have is that dApps need index data to develop complex queries so they can create robust user experience in a trust-minimized way. What are examples of UX benefits that users would see and experience with this data?
So I think so if you're not familiar with how the blockchain works, basically you have validators and you have full nodes, and there's something called archive mode, which is a complete historical copy from the first block all the way to the latest block. And so that's usually known as on-chain data. And we have a lot of services that are working on caching data. Maybe Covalent could tell us a little bit about some of the index, but a lot of people also just pull that data directly off the archive nodes.
Yeah, so at Covalent, we have this philosophy that it's all on-chain data, it's public, and it belongs in the public space. And so what we're working on is a framework to be able to take this data and give it back. And so providing the tools to be able to extract this data by patching the nodes at the very source. And what we call this is a unified data export for all on-chain data that basically unifies the schema of on-chain data and then makes it accessible through a unified API. And so this unification across all EVM and non-EVM is what we are striving for, and the schema is what basically does the trick. So we are like all behind on this.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. When it comes to indexing data, I spent a lot of years working in the machine learning ops space. And when you index data, it really depends on the use case of that specific application. So at Pocket Network, we're essentially a proxy RPC layer for any other full node or archival node that you might need. But depending on the needs of your application, you may need to index it in some specific way, or load it, what's called ETL. You extract it, transform it, and load it in some specific mechanism and schema that's needed for your app. If it's very standard, there could be potentially already a service provider that pre-indexed it for you the way you need it. It makes things very easy. It makes it very easy to bootstrap, but then you are obviously losing some trustlessness and some permissionless because you're putting you're putting trust of indexing on someone else. So there's a lot of different angles, and really depending on what your latency is, how much resources do you have to really pull all the data yourself and index it yourself on your local database. It really is a spectrum rather than just one solution.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing we've seen at Ankr is there's many different protocols and dApps that are pulling in all this archive data, and we've just needed insanely good hardware to support the archive. So we've built a custom bare metal server that we put all over the world. We got like 30 terabytes of NVMe storage on each server, and we get crazy good performance on that. So I think we're we're not using like the cloud providers to do that. We're literally customizing the hardware to kind of fit these use cases.
So if you look at the sort of data warehousing stack, you have the nodes at the bottom layer. Then you have the nodes that create the data and extract it. So we call this the ingester. And then on top of this is the actual API that is able to serve those requests. And you can perform optimizations at any point in the stack. Obviously, it makes sense to optimize the DB for as many calls as possible, because at the end of the day, it's the data that you're providing. And at Covalent, we thought of this in a different way compared to traditional sort of ETL pipelines, which is extract, transform, load. We do a extract, load, transform. So we load all the data on-chain directly as much as possible with high fidelity and transform it on runtime. So we don't have to worry about the extra cost of transforming it for separate use cases separately. We just have everything on-chain all at the same time.
Yep.
So I'm going to put this question to Albert. With how fast the space moves, dApp developers want to be able to go to market very quickly. How does each of your projects address, or how does your project address this challenge?
So the challenge of trying to go to market quickly is the question?
Yeah, so dApp developers want to go to market very quickly.
Yeah.
So how do they address this?
Definitely, that's a great question. So when Alchemy started in 2017, one of the biggest problems in the landscape was by talking to hundreds of developers out there who were trying to make something useful with this technology, there was really a lack of tooling, a lack of ability to read and write from the blockchain. And so Alchemy decided, the founders originally wanted to create this kind of like, decentralized network. Everybody can provide this type of service. But what developers really needed and what they were telling the company is that they wanted a scalable, reliable, and data consistent way to interact with blockchains. And so that was really the first thing that Alchemy had started building. It's called Supernode, and it provides all of those qualities, and people have really enjoyed that service. And then once that started working really well, then we realized, okay, there's all of these different forms of data that people might want to use. And so we started building enhanced APIs. These are higher level abstractions. For example, one that came out recently is the NFT API. So if you're a developer and you want to make a gallery, a marketplace, a wallet, whatever it is, normally you would have to, without Supernode infrastructure, without these APIs, spin up your own node, wait for the blockchain to sync. That could take days. It's really annoying. And then after that, you have to read all the data about the NFTs that you want to show, index it yourself. That's also really annoying. And so by having these APIs, you can actually go to market really fast because it's as simple as switching out your RPC link to connect to the blockchain and then querying an API endpoint to get the NFT data that you need. So we're the number one thing that drives us, and I think all of us probably, is just moving the space forward as fast as we can, and that requires having really good tooling. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so thinking about node infrastructure and spectrum of decentralization, how do we mitigate the risk for developers and consequently users of their dApps if they're relying heavily on certain entity for blockchain data?
So the question is for blockchain data specifically, or?
So I think the question is more about the abstraction layer.
Okay, so what I think is, at the moment, not to go into meme land, but it is still early in the sense that there aren't really any super mission critical applications built on the blockchain. My insurance, my identity, I can go outside and even if there's a chain halt, my life still goes on. Maybe at some point in the future where my car might not start, for example, if there's a chain halt, or if the data integrity of a certain piece of data that's necessary for the ignition to go on is quite critical, that's where the risk really starts kicking in. So today, I completely agree. The tooling, we just all need to move as fast as possible, enable developers as fast as possible. But when we get to the point where our livelihood or really like mission critical data is dependent on the blockchain, then there's a risk will come in, and that's when we're gonna really need to approach true full decentralization, and which will put the onus on the developer to start putting more effort and thought on indexing indexing things using their own infrastructure.
Yeah, so one of the things I've seen, I agree, like we're still pretty early on in the space, but we've seen incredible growth in emerging markets like Brazil, Nigeria, and Argentina in particular. We served like 1 billion requests from Argentina the last 30 days, and the Argentinian peso is down like 20%. So I feel like we're seeing DeFi is being adopted as critical banking infrastructure, right? And that requires like on-chain data, right? And so I just think that's incredible, and I think on-chain data is going to be very, very important for enabling this future where DeFi becomes a financial system for the rest of the world.
So certain use cases have more data demands than others, and we've started to see like the marketplace demands, the demands coming in from like DeFi exchanges, and also just doing like forensic analysis on this data, having extreme good use cases at Covalent. And we've been growing like crazily over the last year with like more than 500 dApps doing all of these cases. And because we are use case agnostic, we start to keep a tab on what's happening in that space. And because progressive decentralization is the way to go for this kind of data, there should be no central point of failure. So it's really important that the nodes that are able to extract this data and be able to index it and further able to provide these sort of queries at runtime is something that the developers can themselves run on their sort of infrastructure. It has to be optimized to that level, but maybe not for like bigger chains which hold like maybe 2 terabytes and more of data. So it's also about like node optimization as much as it is about storage and query optimization.
Yeah, and another thing we've seen too at Ankr is that a lot of projects aren't using just like one node as a service provider, they're using multiple. So we see some of our customers are also using Pocket, some of them are also using Alchemy, and they're kind of comparing and constantly testing the results back and forth. I think that's ultimately good for the space, right? We don't want to be relying on one single point of failure.
Totally.
Okay, so what type of challenges do y'all see from each of your perspectives in a multi-chain world?
The recent hack, for example?
I can answer that. So one of the challenges we just did is at Ankr, we contributed to the Aragon node client, and we ported that over and enabled it for Binance Smart Chain. And so as you guys know, with Ethereum, there's several different node clients. There's Aragon, there's Nethermind, there's Geth. A lot of the emerging multi-chain space just has Geth right now. And so I think like one area of opportunity for our space is to continue innovate on the node clients, to bring more node clients to other chains, because that will ultimately help the diversification of the network and the decentralization of each one of these other multi-chains.
So one of the things that I think will be a really big challenge in the future is right now when we talk about bridging, basically just bridging assets from one chain to another, that's already a huge undertaking with a lot of risk that involves a multi-sig and potentially a little bit of centralization. When we take it to the next level, and imagine, again, I used to work in virtual reality and autonomous vehicles, so a lot of image data that really requires a lot of processing. When we get to the point when we go, let's say, just past DeFi or just past assets, but we actually need to do cross-chain image data, for example, that is going to be a challenge that I haven't even started thinking about too much yet, because the amount of indexing we need to do, the amount of processing we need to do, schema interoperability is just going to be very complex. But when we do get there, I think it'll be a very exciting step for the whole ecosystem.